When we think about success, fulfillment, and happiness, we often imagine more. More time, more money, more recognition, more experiences. We believe that the path to a meaningful life is paved with addition, that every answer lies in accumulation. But what if the real secret is subtraction? What if the key to having more isn't found in adding, but in removing? We live in a world that glorifies more. We are told to multitask, to hustle harder, to chase bigger dreams, to always be busy. Yet, beneath that constant motion, many people feel lost, exhausted, and disconnected. We confuse activity with progress, abundance with fulfillment, and noise with purpose. But clarity, real clarity, comes not from adding more, but from taking away what doesn't serve us. Think of your mind as a room. If that room is cluttered with distractions, there's no space to think, to breathe, or to grow. But the moment you begin to remove the unnecessary, something powerful happens. You can finally see what truly matters. Simplicity is not about having less. It's about making room for what's meaningful. It's about focus. Consider the most effective leaders, creators, and thinkers. They're not defined by how much they do, but by how clearly they know what not to do. They understand that focus is a discipline, not an accident. They know that every yes carries the weight of 100 no's. To choose wisely is to live intentionally. Minimalism, in thought and action, isn't about deprivation. It's about liberation. When you strip away the unnecessary, you uncover the essence of who you are and what you stand for. It's the same reason why some of the most inspiring ideas are simple. The power of less is that it gives space for impact. When we remove what's unnecessary, we make room for excellence. Think about your relationships, your work, your goals. How much of what you do each day truly aligns with what matters most to you? Most people aren't overwhelmed because they have too little. They're overwhelmed because they have too much, too many choices, too many commitments, too many distractions. When we learn to say no to what doesn't serve our values, we make room for what truly fulfills us. True abundance doesn't come from having everything. It comes from needing less. The less you chase external validation, the more you discover internal peace. The less you try to impress others, the more you connect with your authentic self. The less you spread your energy across 100 shallow pursuits, the more depth you bring to the few that matter. So when we say less is more, it's not a slogan. It's a principle of life. It's the understanding that everything valuable, time, energy, focus, is limited. And what we choose to do with it determines the quality of our lives. The goal isn't to do everything, it's to do the right things. The goal isn't to have it all, it's to have what matters. We often admire people who seem calm, focused, and purposeful. But what we don't always see is what they've given up. They've learned the power of intentional sacrifice, the art of choosing less so that what remains becomes extraordinary. In the end, life isn't about accumulation, it's about alignment. When we align our actions with our values, our purpose, and our vision, everything we do gains meaning. When we declutter our minds, our schedules, and our ambitions, we rediscover balance. Less isn't about scarcity, it's about clarity. And clarity is what turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. If you want to have more peace, focus on less chaos. If you want to have more joy, let go of what drains you. If you want to have more success, stop chasing what doesn't align with your purpose. The secret to having more is not about doing more. It's about being more. And to be more, we must first learn to need less. 5 keynotes of the speech. Simplicity creates clarity. When we remove distractions and excess, we make space to focus on what truly matters. Focus is a discipline. True success comes not from doing everything, but from mastering the art of choosing what not to do. Less leads to fulfillment, having less clutter. Mental, emotional, or material allows us to experience deeper satisfaction. Intentional living brings balance. Saying no to what doesn't serve our purpose helps us align with what does. True abundance is internal. Real wealth is found in peace, purpose, and clarity, not in accumulation. Simplicity creates clarity, a truth that seems so easy to understand yet so hard to live by. In our pursuit of more, we often make life unnecessarily complicated. We add layers, distractions, and noise until we can no longer see what truly matters. Simplicity is not about removing everything. It is about refining, about distilling life down to its essence. It's about finding the signal in the noise, the purpose in the mess, and the focus in the storm. When things are simple, they become clear. And when they are clear, we find direction, peace, and meaning. Think about how often we chase complexity because we mistake it for progress. We believe that the more complicated something is, the more valuable it must be. But in reality, complexity often hides confusion. It clouds our vision, scatters our attention, and leaves us feeling lost. Simplicity, on the other hand, invites understanding. It turns chaos into order and allows the mind to breathe. When you simplify your goals, your work, and your life, you begin to see the path ahead with greater sharpness. You know where to step, what to avoid, and what to focus on. In a world filled with distractions, clarity is rare. Our minds are constantly bombarded with information, messages, alerts, comparisons, and expectations. We scroll endlessly, consume without reflection, and fill our days with noise that leaves no room for silence. Yet silence is where insight lies. When you remove the unnecessary, your mind begins to hear itself again. You can distinguish between what's urgent and what's important, between what's fleeting and what's lasting. That's the magic of simplicity. It clears the fog so you can finally see the horizon. Take the example of great design or innovation. The The best inventions in history weren't the most complicated, they were the simplest. The wheel, the light bulb, the smartphone all began as ideas refined to their purest form. Simplicity is the hallmark of mastery. It takes wisdom to strip away the excess until only the essential remains. The same applies to life. When we simplify how we think, work, and connect, we begin to operate with purpose instead of pressure. Simplicity doesn't mean doing less work or caring less. It means removing the unnecessary effort that doesn't move you forward. It's saying no to what doesn't align with your priorities so that your energy can be devoted to what truly matters. When we stop trying to please everyone, when we stop filling our calendars with meaningless activity, we reclaim the ability to think deeply and act decisively. Every great leader, thinker, or creator knows this truth. Clarity comes from focus, and focus comes from simplicity. But achieving simplicity is not easy because it requires courage. It means letting go of the comfortable clutter we've grown used to. It means confronting the fear that maybe, just maybe, we've been busy but not effective. Most people avoid simplicity because it demands self-awareness. When life is simple, there's nowhere to hide. Our choices, our values, our priorities all become visible. But that visibility is also our freedom. Once we see clearly, we can live intentionally. Imagine a person trying to carry too many bags at once. They may take a few steps, but soon their arms tire, their pace slows, and they lose balance. Life works the same way. The more we carry unnecessary responsibilities, toxic relationships, emotional baggage, the less progress we make. The moment we decide to put a few of those bags down, suddenly we move faster, lighter, freer. That's what simplicity does. It liberates us from what weighs us down. In work, simplicity brings productivity. When we clarify our objectives, our actions become sharper and more effective. A team that understands a single clear purpose will outperform one casing 10 different goals. In relationships, simplicity brings honesty. When we communicate openly and remove pretenses, we build trust. And in personal growth, simplicity brings peace. When we stop comparing ourselves to everyone else and focus only on what we can control, we rediscover gratitude and confidence. Simplicity also demands that we slow down. We often move so quickly that we confuse speed with direction. But moving fast without clarity only takes us further from where we want to go. When we pause, reflect, and simplify, we align movement with meaning. We realize that progress isn't measured by how much we do, but by how intentionally we do it. The irony of simplicity is that it's hard work. It's easy to live cluttered, to say yes to everything, to keep chasing the next thing, to fill every moment with activity. But simplicity is a discipline. It's the practice of asking again and again, does this matter? Does this move me closer to who I want to become? Does this reflect my values, my purpose, my truth? If the answer is no, then the bravest thing we can do is to let it go. Simplicity creates clarity because it filters out the noise that clouds our vision. It teaches us to value quality over quantity, purpose over popularity, and depth over distraction. When we live simply, we don't lose richness, we uncover it. We begin to see that what truly fills our lives isn't the number of things we have, but the meaning behind what we choose to keep. Clarity doesn't come from adding more. It comes from removing what doesn't belong. The less we hold on to what's unnecessary, the more space we create for what's meaningful. And that space, that stillness, is where our best ideas, our truest relationships, and our deepest peace begin to grow. Focus is a discipline, not a gift. It's not something you stumble upon when everything around you becomes calm. It's something you build day after day in the middle of the noise. In a world that constantly demands our attention, the ability to focus has become a rare and powerful skill. Most people confuse movement with progress, business with productivity, and multitasking with effectiveness. But the truth is, the more you scatter your attention, the less impact you create. Focus is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters with intention and depth. To focus is to choose, and every choice has a cost. Every yes you say is also a no to something else. The most successful people aren't those who have mastered doing everything, they are the ones who have learned to say no to almost everything. They protect their time and attention like it's sacred, because it is. They understand that time is finite, energy is limited, and clarity is fragile. To stay focused is to live with awareness, to constantly ask, is this helping me move toward what truly matters? But focus doesn't come naturally. Our minds crave novelty, stimulation, and validation. That's why distractions feel so satisfying. Even though they take us further from what we want, it takes strength to stay on one path when the world keeps offering shortcuts and side roads. It takes discipline to keep your eyes on your purpose when everything else seems urgent. Yet that is where greatness lies, not in spreading yourself thin, but in giving your best where it counts the most. Imagine a beam of light. When it's scattered, it lights up a room. But when you concentrate that same light into a single point, it becomes a laser, powerful enough to cut through steel. Focus works the same way. The same energy, when scattered across many directions, produces noise. But when concentrated on one goal, it creates impact. That's why every remarkable achievement in history, whether in art, science, business, or leadership, was born from the power of focus. Someone chose to devote themselves fully to one vision, one mission, one idea, and saw it through. We often hear people say they don't have enough time. But time isn't the real problem, it's attention. We all have the same 24 hours, yet the results we create depend entirely on where we place our focus. A person who invests those hours intentionally will always outperform the one who spends them reactively. Focus gives you leverage. It allows you to do more with less effort, to achieve depth instead of speed, and to turn ordinary work into meaningful progress. The discipline of focus also requires clarity of values. You cannot focus if you don't know what matters. When your goals are scattered or undefined, your actions will reflect that confusion. But when your purpose is clear, focus becomes easier because every distraction stands out as misalignment. The clearer your why, the stronger your no. That's why people who live with focus seem calm and grounded. They are not pulled in 100 directions because they've already decided what deserves their energy. Focus also requires courage. It means having the strength to let go of opportunities that don't align with your purpose, even if they look attractive. It means saying no to things that others might celebrate because you know they don't serve your mission. It's not about doing less for the sake of it. It's about doing the right things for the right reasons. And that's difficult because our culture rewards business, not clarity. But the truth is, doing more doesn't make you successful. Doing what matters does. There's also an emotional side to focus. It's not just a mental exercise. It's a commitment of the heart. You must care deeply about what you're focusing on, or else distractions will always win. Passion fuels focus, but discipline sustains it. Motivation will fade, excitement will waver, but discipline, the daily decision to return your attention to what matters, is what builds results. Every time you choose to return to your purpose, you strengthen that mental muscle. Over time, focus becomes not just what you do, but who you are. In relationships, focus shows up as presence. When you truly listen to someone without your phone, without your mind wandering, you give them the rare gift of attention. That kind of focus builds trust and connection. In work, focus shows up as excellence. The difference between average and exceptional is often nothing more than sustained concentration. And in personal growth, focus shows up as progress because when you give consistent attention to one goal, even small steps compound into massive change. Focus is also about rhythm. It's not about working nonstop. It's about working with intention, then resting with purpose. Even the most disciplined minds need recovery. Without balance, focus becomes burnout. The goal is not to push yourself endlessly, but to protect your energy for the things that matter most. Rest refuels clarity, and clarity restores focus. We often underestimate how much mental clutter we carry. Every unfinished task, every open loop, every maybe we haven't decided on, all of it consumes mental space. The first step towards stronger focus is to simplify close loops, make decisions, and clear the fog. The fewer things your mind has to hold on to, the more power it has to go deep into what matters. In the end, focus is an act of respect for your time, for your purpose, and for your potential. It's a declaration that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on distractions. It's the discipline of choosing depth over speed, meaning over movement, and purpose over pressure. When you learn to focus, you don't just become more productive, you become more present, more intentional, and more fulfilled. Having less leads to fulfillment, a truth that sounds simple, yet it challenges the very foundation of how most of us live. We are taught from childhood that happiness comes from having more money, more possessions, more achievements, more recognition. But the more we chase more, the further we seem to drift from peace. The irony is that fulfillment doesn't grow with addition, it grows with reduction. When we strip away the excess, the noise, the clutter, the comparison, what remains is something deeper, purer, and infinitely more satisfying. Fulfillment is not about the quantity of what you have, but the quality of how you experience it. You can own many things and still feel empty. You can achieve great success and still feel lost. That's because fulfillment is not external, it's internal. It comes from alignment, from living in a way that reflects your values, your purpose, and your truth. When you have less to distract you, you can finally hear yourself again. You begin to notice the simple joys, the quiet victories, the moments that don't look impressive on social media, but mean everything to your heart. Think about how often we fill our lives with things that don't matter just to avoid facing the silence. We fill our schedules so we don't have to slow down and reflect. We fill our homes with possessions to prove our worth. We fill our minds with noise so we don't have to listen to the questions that really matter. But the truth is, when you stop chasing more, you make space for meaning. And that space, that breathing room, is where fulfillment begins to grow. The reason less feels uncomfortable to many people is that it forces us to confront ourselves. When we stop surrounding ourselves with distractions, we are left with our thoughts, our fears, and our truths. But this confrontation is necessary. It's only when you stop drowning in excess that you realize what actually fills your soul. The endless pursuit of more often hides insecurity, the belief that we are not enough as we are. But fulfillment begins the moment we stop trying to prove our worth and start appreciating it. Consider the difference between pleasure and fulfillment. Pleasure is short-lived, it fades quickly, and it always demands more. It's the high of achievement, the rush of validation, the thrill of newness. But fulfillment is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention, it rests in contentment. It's found in the way you live, the way you give, and the way you grow. You don't need more to be fulfilled. You just need to be present with what you already have. The less you chase, the more you cherish. The less you consume, the more you appreciate. Having less doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means freeing yourself from excess so you can focus on what truly matters. When you stop trying to have everything, you begin to enjoy what's already in front of you. A simple meal shared with people you love can bring more joy than a luxury feast eaten in isolation. A single moment of genuine laughter can outweigh 1,000 empty achievements. When you have less clutter, physical, emotional, or mental life feels lighter. You move with ease because you're no longer carrying the burden of unnecessary wants. Fulfillment also grows through gratitude. When we constantly want more, we train our minds to see what's missing. But when we learn to appreciate what we already have, our perspective shifts. We begin to see abundance not as something to acquire, but as something to notice. The smallest moments, a conversation, a sunset, a quiet morning, become treasures. Gratitude transforms less into enough. And when you feel that something is enough, you experience peace that no amount of more can ever buy. The pursuit of more often leads us into competition with others, with society, even with ourselves. But fulfillment doesn't require comparison. It comes from living authentically in alignment with who you are, not who you're expected to be. When you stop measuring your worth against someone else's achievements, you find freedom. You start valuing growth over approval, meaning over image. And that's when fulfillment deepens, when you no longer need external validation to feel whole. Many people spend their lives accumulating wealth or status only to realize later that it never filled the emptiness inside. They mistook achievement for purpose. True fulfillment doesn't come from what you acquire. It comes from what you contribute. It's not in taking more from the world, but in giving more to it. When you simplify your life, you free time and energy for generosity, for creativity, for connection, things that truly nourish the soul. Even in the smallest acts of simplicity, fulfillment can be found. When you declutter your space, you feel lighter. When you let go of toxic relationships, you breathe easier. When you reduce commitments that don't align with your values, you reclaim your time. Every time you choose less of what drains you, you create more room for what fulfills you. Life doesn't get richer when it gets heavier. It gets richer when it gets lighter. Having less leads to fulfillment because it shifts your focus from possession to presence. When you stop trying to fill every moment with something new, you begin to experience the depth of what's already there. You find joy not in addition, but in awareness. You stop chasing happiness and start living it. The secret isn't of everything you want, it's to want everything you have. And once you understand that, less no longer feels like sacrifice, it feels like freedom. Intentional living brings balance. It's a phrase that carries quiet power because behind it lies a simple truth. Life doesn't become balanced by accident. It becomes balanced when we live with purpose, when every choice we make reflects who we are and what we value. Most people are not out of balance because they don't have enough time or opportunity. They're out of balance because they say yes to everything. They try to please everyone, chase everything, and be everywhere. But intentional living is different. It's the art of choosing carefully, of designing your life around meaning instead of momentum. When we live without intention, life feels scattered. Days blur into each other, filled with activity but lacking fulfillment. We wake up busy, go to bed tired, and still feel like we're missing something. That's because business is not the same as purpose. Without intention, we react to life instead of directing it. We allow circumstances, expectations, and distractions to dictate where our energy goes. Intentional living asks us to pause and ask a deeper question. Am I living by design or by default? To live intentionally is to live awake. It means being conscious of how you spend your time, where you invest your energy, and who you allow into your space. It means making choices not out of habit or pressure, but out of clarity. When you live with intention, you stop saying yes automatically. You start weighing your decisions against your values. You start asking, does this align with who I want to be? Does this bring me closer to the life I want to create? That single act of awareness can transform your entire direction. Balance doesn't come from trying to divide your time equally among everything. It comes from prioritizing what truly matters. There will always be more things to do than hours in a day. The key is to make sure that what fills your time reflects what fulfills your soul. Intentional living is not about perfection. It's about alignment. It's choosing progress over pressure, meaning over motion. When you live with intention, you stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. Many people believe balance is about managing time, but it's really about managing attention. You can spend hours on something and still feel empty if your heart isn't in it. But when you give even a few moments of full, focused presence to something that matters, it nourishes you. Intentional living teaches us to direct our attention deliberately, to give energy only to what adds value to our lives. That might mean letting go of certain habits, relationships, or goals that no longer serve us. It might mean creating space for rest, for reflection, or for the people who make us better. Living intentionally also means learning the power of no. Every no you give to something unimportant is really a yes to something meaningful. We often underestimate how much peace we can create simply by refusing what doesn't align with our values. It's not selfish to protect your energy, it's wise. When you know your priorities, saying no stops feeling like guilt and starts feeling like strength. It's not about shutting people out. It's about showing up fully for the right things. Balance is not a state we achieve once. It's something we continually adjust. There will be seasons when work demands more of us and seasons when family or health take priority. Intentional living allows us to adapt without losing ourselves. It reminds us that we can't do everything, but we can do the things that matter most. It teaches us to trade perfection for presence, to choose depth over distraction. When we stop chasing balance as an outcome and start living it as a mindset, life begins to flow with greater harmony. Intentional living also transforms how we experience success. Instead of measuring progress by numbers or recognition, we start measuring it by alignment, by how well our outer life reflects our inner values. You can achieve incredible things and still feel off balance if your actions don't match your purpose. But when they do, even small accomplishments feel fulfilling. The most peaceful people aren't those who have the most, but those who live in harmony with what they believe. Living intentionally also changes our relationship with time. We begin to see time not as something to manage, but as something sacred. Every moment becomes an opportunity to live with meaning. Even the smallest actions, a kind word, a deep breath, a quiet morning, become part of something larger. When you live with intention, you don't just go through life, you grow through it. You stop rushing toward the next thing and start being fully alive in the present. There is a calm that comes from knowing you are living in alignment. You stop feeling torn between competing priorities because you've chosen which ones truly deserve you. You stop chasing validation because you already know your direction. The world around you may still be chaotic, but inside there's clarity. That's what balance feels like. Not the absence of chaos, but the presence of purpose. Intentional living brings balance because it reconnects you to what's real. It helps you separate the noise from the truth, the temporary from the timeless. It reminds you that a well-lived life is not one filled with everything, but one filled with meaning. Every choice becomes a chance to live with purpose, and every day becomes a reflection of what truly matters. When you live that way, balance stops being something you chase. It becomes something you embody. True abundance is internal. It's not something you can hold, buy, or display. It's something you feel, a quiet, steady sense of contentment that doesn't depend on circumstances. The world tells us that abundance means accumulation, more money, more recognition, more possessions, more comfort. But the more we chase external abundance, the emptier we often feel. Because true abundance isn't about what you have, it's about how you see. It's not measured by wealth or status, but by gratitude, purpose, and peace of mind. We live in a culture that equates success with visibility. We measure our worth by comparison, by how much further ahead someone else seems to be. But that kind of abundance is fragile, because it depends on things that can change overnight. Money can be lost, attention can fade, achievements can be forgotten. When your sense of fulfillment depends on the external, you'll always live in fear of losing it. But when abundance lives within you, it can't be taken away. It becomes a steady flame that burns quietly, even in the darkest times. True abundance begins when you stop asking, what do I need to have more of? And start asking, what do I already have that matters? Gratitude shifts everything. It transforms lack into appreciation and scarcity into sufficiency. When you begin to notice the small gifts in your life, the people who care, the moments of laughter, the beauty and simplicity, you realize that you already live in abundance. You start to see that joy doesn't come from getting everything you want. It comes from wanting everything you have. Abundance is also a state of perspective. Two people can stand in the same situation and experience it completely differently. One sees scarcity, the other sees possibility. The difference isn't in their circumstances, it's in their mindset. When you believe that life is happening for you, not against you, every challenge becomes a lesson and every setback a chance to grow. That's abundance, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of meaning. When your mind is rich with purpose, even a small life feels vast. We often believe that once we achieve a certain milestone, a promotion, a relationship, a lifestyle, we'll finally feel complete. But that kind of thinking traps us in a cycle of endless pursuit. Each victory brings only temporary satisfaction before we begin craving the next one. True abundance breaks that cycle. It reminds us that fulfillment doesn't come from reaching the finish line, but from finding joy in the journey. The more you learn to appreciate the process, the less you depend on the outcome. Real abundance also comes from contribution. When you give freely, your time, your energy, your kindness, you experience a kind of richness that money can't buy. Giving doesn't create loss, it creates expansion. The more you give, the more connected you feel, and the more meaning your life holds. That's why some of the happiest people in the world are not the richest, but the most generous. They've discovered that abundance multiplies when it's shared. When you live with an open heart, life tends to return that energy in ways you never expect. There's a deep calm that comes from knowing you are enough as you are. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you begin to live with freedom. You stop rushing to prove your worth and start resting in it. That shift from seeking validation to living in alignment is where inner abundance grows. It's not arrogance, it's acceptance. You realize that your value was never meant to be earned, only expressed. And when you live from that truth, you stop chasing approval and start creating authenticity. Abundance also exists in presence. When you're fully here, not caught in the regrets of the past or the worries of the future, you experience the richness of now. Most of the beauty in life is missed not because it isn't there, but because we're too distracted to notice it. True abundance is being aware enough to see it. The warmth of sunlight, the comfort of silence, the depth of connection in a conversation. These are the moments that fill the soul, but they can only be felt by those who slow down long enough to experience them. Scarcity lives in comparison, but abundance lives in appreciation. The moment you stop comparing your path to someone else's, you begin to feel gratitude for your own. You see that life isn't a competition, it's a creation. Every person has their own rhythm, their own purpose, their own pace. When you honor your own journey, you stop striving for what you lack and start nurturing what you have. That's the essence of internal abundance, peace with who you are, where you are, and what you're building. Abundance also requires trust. Trust in timing, trust in process, and trust in yourself. Life rarely unfolds the way we plan, but often exactly the way we need. When you trust that each moment, even the difficult ones, serves a purpose, you stop resisting and start learning. That acceptance opens the door to abundance, because peace grows where resistance ends. You begin to realize that you don't need everything to be perfect to feel whole. You just need to be present and willing to grow. True abundance isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't show off. It's quiet, steady, and unshakable. It's the kind of wealth that stays with you even when everything else changes. It's found in gratitude, in presence, in giving, and in peace. When you live from that place, you no longer chase life, you receive it. And in that receiving, you discover that the richest life of all isn't the one filled with more, but the one filled with meaning. In the end, the idea that less is the secret to having more is not just a philosophy, it's a way of living. It challenges everything the world tells us about success, happiness, and meaning. We've been taught to chase more possessions, more recognition, more achievements, believing that somewhere in that race lies fulfillment. But the truth is, fulfillment begins the moment we stop running. When we choose simplicity over excess, focus over distraction, purpose over pressure, we begin to experience life as it was meant to be lived, deeply, intentionally, and peacefully. Having less doesn't mean losing. It means gaining clarity, peace, and control over what truly matters. It means freeing ourselves from the weight of unnecessary expectations and returning to what gives us strength. When we simplify, we don't shrink our lives, we expand their meaning. We make space for love, creativity, and joy to grow. We stop existing in reaction and start living in alignment. The secret to having more is not about possession, it's about perception. It's about seeing abundance not as something we must earn, but as something we already have within us. When you focus on what matters, when you live with intention, when you let go of what no longer serves you, you realize that you were never missing anything. You were simply too busy to notice what was already there. So choose less noise, less distraction, less chaos, and in return, you'll find more peace, more clarity, and more purpose. Because in the end, the richest life isn't the one filled with everything, but the one filled with meaning. And when you live that way, you don't just have more, you become more.